Dear brothers, holy deacons of the church, my sisters, today's gospel begins with this powerful programmatic statement of Jesus. A statement that shows his affirmative evaluation and respect for what the law and prophets stand for. Jesus seems to defend himself against the possible misunderstanding that he came to abolish the law and the prophets, and so distances himself from how the scribes and the Pharisees understand and apply the Torah. The law and the prophets represent for the Jews the revelation of God's will, a revelation that regulates, guides, and directs human life here on earth. They are understood not so much as legal codes, as a way of life, a code of conduct, and what gives orientation, direction, and guidance and purpose to the life of people. And the Jews considered the Torah not a burden, but a gift from God. A gift through which the God-human relationship is nourished and sustained. It is a gift that ensures and protects the freedom entrusted to us by God. And it is at the service of life. Living a righteous life is a choice. It is an exercise of our freedom. Accordingly, righteousness or virtuousness, the kaiozune, is attained by living one's life in accordance with the demands of the Torah. And the Torah refers not only to the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, but to the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament. Jesus acknowledges and confirms the overriding importance, the continued relevance, and unrestricted and unbreakable validity of the law and the prophets, and thus emphasizes, "I tell you solemnly, till heaven and earth pass away, not one dot, not one little stroke shall disappear from the law until its purpose is achieved." And yet for Jesus, it is not enough to live according to the Torah, as many of his contemporaries, especially the scribes and the Pharisees, were doing. For the disciples of Jesus, who constitute the new community of salvation, therefore, there is more to righteousness, more to virtuousness than simply and dutifully following the dictates of the law or living the normal life expected of everyone else. Thus, today's gospel presents the so-called antithesis of the Gospel of Matthew, a compilation of teachings in which Jesus upholds and yet goes beyond what the Torah demands by modifying, correcting, intensifying, and bringing the Torah to its perfection and fulfillment. With these exemplary guidelines, Jesus does not abrogate the Torah. He does not minimize the value of any of his demands. Rather, he sharpens each of them, enabling the Torah to be fulfilled according to its innermost intention. On his own authority and conscious of his mission on earth, Jesus brings out what should distinguish his followers. He sets a new standard that is at once demanding and challenging. In today's gospel, we have 4 such instances or exemplary instructions. They concern enmity and murder. They concern lustfulness and adultery, divorce, and swearing of oath and truthfulness. And in each case, Jesus says emphatically and authoritatively, You have heard that it was said, but now I say to you. What Jesus teaches, in contrast to the scribes and the Pharisees, even in its naive radicality, is graspable with spontaneous wisdom because Jesus speaks directly to the heart of his audience, then and now. What Jesus says is obvious and concerns the regulation of interhuman relationship in the face of the new and eschatological salvation he has come to bring. And what this means is that whoever accepts Jesus, whoever accepts his message about the inbreaking basileia of God, the person must consequently show in action, in an attitude, and in lifestyle that often contrasts with what is socially acceptable or socially normal or common. It is the attitude and lifestyle of surpassing righteousness, encapsulated in the golden rule, which Jesus says in Matthew's Gospel is the fulfillment of all the law and the prophets. My dear brothers and sisters, the antithesis tell us not only that we should do everything out of love, but also what concretely we can and should do out of love. We are not already righteous or virtuous because we have not killed anybody, not committed adultery, or not even sworn an oath falsely. That means abusing the name of God. But there is more to it. We should, for instance, respect the life, the dignity, the inviolability of every human life, and therefore be careful not to allow ourselves to be ruled by anger and hatred to the point of taking the life of another person. That conflicts arise in our relationships with one another. There is nothing abnormal. It is to be expected because we come from different backgrounds. We have different views about life. We have different visions about life. And therefore, there must be conflicts between us. But reconciliation with an erring brother or sister is much more important than whatever sacrifice or offering we could ever make to God. And that is why the gospel says, if you bring your offerings, and there at the altar you remember that your brother has something against you, drop your offerings there. Go back. Go and settle with your brother. Go and reconcile with him before you bring your offering. The reconciliation is much more important than every sacrifice you can make. And this is because we can hardly claim to be in a good relationship with God while living in conflict, in enmity, in hostility with our fellow human beings. That's a contradiction, gentlemen. In much the same way, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble through self-control and respect for other people, especially respect for their privacy, through modesty and continence, especially in sexual matters, rather than through unbridled gratification. The imagery of self-mutilation, of losing an important part of the arm, the eye or the arm, for instance, to save the whole body, is instructive. And it points to moral integrity. It points to responsibility and the eradication of the evil that is within each and every one of us. Jesus' word on marital fidelity and divorce tells us that marriages and families could be saved by the partner's irrevocable love and fidelity to one another, rather than taking the risk, risking one's marriage and risking one's family through a fling, through an affair, or other acts that could lead to loss of confidence and trust and eventually break up. How often does it happen that friendships and other important relationships break up because someone is insincere, someone is outright dishonest, and therefore cannot or can no longer be trusted? Truthfulness Sincerity and honesty are indispensable virtues in every interhuman relationship, in our relationship with one another, in our relationship with God. They build confidence and trust. They make us feel safe and taken seriously. And where sincerity and honesty reign, there will be no need for swearing. My dear brothers and sisters, is it possible to live by the standards set by Jesus in these antitheses? I think it is. However, not out of obligation or duty, but out of love and in response to God's invitation and grace. The first reading tells us, if you wish, you can keep the commandments. To behave faithfully is within your power. It is within my power and my freedom. Because in creating me, God gave me freedom of choice. Everything I do or do not do is a question of my decision and choice. Whether I allow destructive feelings such as anger, such as rancor and aggression, or offensive, derogatory, or contemptuous behavior to rule, to dominate my life and my relationship with people. Whether I live a sexually promiscuous life, or I become toxic and unbearable to people around me. Whether I live a life of dishonesty and deceit, it is the result of my decision and choice. And that means that I can choose to live differently. I can choose not to allow bitterness and hatred consume and control me, but rather take the path of compassion, the path of mercy, of understanding, of forgiveness and reconciliation. I can always choose reconciliation instead of revenge. I can choose to control my sexual desires and not allow them to control and destroy me or destroy other people. I can choose to break away from situations, from places, from encounters, relationships, yeah, even from persons that enslave or lead me to evil. I can also choose to be faithful to the demands of my state of life, as a husband or wife, as a priest or religious, as a single person, as a seminarian. I can choose to be truthful, sincere, and honest in all my dealings, even when it sometimes appears to hurt me socially and financially. I can choose to be straightforward, to be transparent, to be trustworthy, not ambiguous, not meandering, not deceptive or manipulative. I can choose not to want to impress others, preferring substance to appearance. I can choose to always declare my stand by saying yes when I mean yes,